Netshwenda. Good afternoon, media houses, reporters present. As indicated, I am the Acting Deputy Provincial Commissioner for Crime Detection in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, Major General Anthony Gopal. The portfolio extends to general investigations, serious organized crime, serious and violent crime, investigations and your familiar FCS units, as well as commercial crime. Today I'm also joined by two of the provincial heads with me today. That's on my right hand side, it's Brigadier Ntuli for Criminal Investigation Services, and on my left is Brigadier Kunene from the Serious and Violent Crimes Unit. What brings us here today, members of the media and the public at large that is watching, is the fact that there's been much conversation in the media pertaining to investigations that was undertaken in KwaZulu-Natal. And in this particular specific instance, I'm referring to the investigations that came up in the Madlanga Commission, where initially Lieutenant General Khumalo cited certain cases and convictions and a history or record of a one Mr. Stuart Scharnick. His report and his statements in the Madlanga Commission prompted Mr. Stuart to make certain public statements and announcements. I want to just summarize specifically what he had said in that particular, so we put context to his concerns regarding these cases. In the same evening of that briefing, Mr. Stuart indicated that his convictions runs from 2010 to 2011, and it had 18 counts on one case. If you go back to the clip, you'll realize that he talks about one case with 18 counts. And he indicates that he was sentenced to 5 years suspended sentence, and a portion of money was paid. His sentence was, his suspended sentence has since lapsed, and then there were cases where the state had withdrawn. He had various cases which he had reflected on, but he chose then to talk about the one that was resolved only in the court. On November 12th, Mr. Stuart also went back to the media, and then he made certain pronouncements and accusations or leveled allegations against the institution of the South African Police Service. In part of making such allegations against the South African Police Service by virtue of Lieutenant General Khumalo, who had made those statements in his capacity as the head of crime intelligence. By that virtue, South African Police Service then becomes the bearer of such allegations. And he was quite vocal to indicate he intends to join the current acting minister in the South African Police Service to that particular action he intends to take in the matter. Now, I want to then reflect on a few things. Why would we want to call this particular briefing? For the purpose of record all the cases, whether General Khumalo had referred to it, whether it's Lieutenant General Khumalo had referred to those cases, and the cases that Mr. Stuart Scharnick is referring to. They were cases in terms of that particular conviction that were cases in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. So in that, it came to a point where both parties, Lieutenant General Khumalo as well as Scharnick, was referring to very serious cases of hijacking, theft of motor vehicles. And what comes out is that this matter was somehow settled through a plea where a slap on the wrist was given to somebody. And In the case of Mr. Stuart, he is vehemently denying that he was charged on 18 cases. He says he was charged only on one case with many counts. Now, members of the media, I want to then go into one aspect which compromises the integrity of investigations in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, because it then leaves one to ask the question, if he says it's only one case, what happened to the other cases that were serious charges levels against him? And I want to then go into a breakdown of these cases and indicate to you what we have been undertaking. So as a result, in KwaZulu-Natal, we have then called for the profile of Mr. Stuart. We've looked at it in terms of cases where in KwaZulu-Natal he was a subject of investigation, where he was a alleged suspect in the particular matter. We have physically perused each and every one of those cases, and we've been through every single document in every single case file. I want to highlight a few observations that we have made through this exercise. So the first thing I would want to indicate is that we have looked at 29 criminal case dockets. Where? So you have been listening to a version of 18 counts. You heard the story of 18 counts on one case. I'm going to show you a picture of unpacking 29 cases against this particular individual in the province of KwaZulu-Natal and what types of crimes it relates to. I'm going to then start by indicating firstly that 10 of these 29 dockets where part of that plea was related to theft of motor vehicle. The cover of the docket, the charge, the vehicle involved, it's a vehicle, it's a theft of motor vehicle. 8 of these 29 cases that I'm referring to were cases of carjacking. So cases of carjacking. Now if you know, carjacking is slightly different from theft of motor vehicle. In theft of motor vehicle, a car is stolen without interaction in some cases, or there's no interaction with the victim. The car just gets stolen through various means. But when you talk about carjacking, we're talking about a violent crime where force and an extent and a level of aggressive emotion and actions are taken against victims. Now these were 8 such cases. So that gives you a total of 18 cases. So if you understand what we spoke about earlier, Mr. Stuart talks about 18 counts on one case. There are 18 case dockets, a combination of hijackings and theft of motor vehicle that we are talking about. These dockets at the time of investigation we did not see how it ended up into being centralized, but it became centralized to the Serious Organized Crime Unit within the Directorate of Priority Investigations. This is purely from looking at the physical docket before us. We're not talking about anybody making a statement somewhere. We're talking about a physical inspection of every docket. These dockets come from all over KwaZulu-Natal. And members of the media and the public, I will start to cite some of these dockets specifically related to theft of motor vehicles and hijackings. One of such matter was in the Durban Central area, which is a theft of motor vehicle. So in the theft of motor vehicle, it took place where the complainant confirms in his A1 affidavit that his car was stolen from him. We have the details of who the investigating officer, as I said, it was centralized. This is one of those dockets, and it was pulled together with the other dockets. The next case was in Hillcrest. It was a carjacking. This case of carjacking, he was also charged for, and it forms part of the plea agreement that was signed at court. The next case that I will refer to is the case of theft of motor vehicle from Durban North. The following case is a case of carjacking, again at Chatsworth. The next one is a case of carjacking in Westville. We have another case of carjacking in Newlands East. We have a theft of motor vehicle in Townhill, a carjacking again in Sydenham, a carjacking in Pinetown, a theft of motor vehicle in Durban North, a theft of motor vehicle in Townhill, a carjacking in Malvern. Howick is a theft of motor vehicle. In Maryhill is carjacking. In Bratton Beach it's burglary residential. In Richards Bay it's another case. I'm going to come back to that. I will specifically focus on the theft of motor vehicle and a carjacking. Again another carjacking in theft of motor vehicle and housebreaking in Mpangeni. Then another theft of motor vehicle in Hillcrest. And we have then another theft of motor vehicle in Maiden Wharf. I will come to the other cases in a short while. What we find in all of these cases to which the plea, so the court will better explain their processes of how they have accepted this plea. For now, we cannot, and I will not attempt to indicate what would have informed the court at that time to enter into a plea of all these serious crimes against this particular accused in court to the fine that he paid. So I'm producing to you, members of the public and media, that there are 18 such dockets. These dockets, when you open these dockets, it is syndicated. If you understand organized crime, it is syndicated. In most of these dockets, Mr. Stuart is the one who had sold these people who had possession of the cars. In some instance, he was in possession of a car. But in majority of the cases, he sold these cars to people. And when you go into these dockets, there are very common actors that facilitate and enable organized crime to take place. From a scrapyard dealer, to a police clearance, to a registration of the vehicle, there's a whole chain involved. So in that docket, there's a lot of compelling evidence that suggests a lot more than what the plea was made out to be. You can ask yourself, if a person is in possession of a stolen property for one hijacked car, what should be an appropriate sentence? What would be, as the National DPP and the DPP will put it, how will justice be served, and what will be in the public's interest for a person who is a victim of carjacking, where the person who played a role in whichever way, whether it's a role of facilitating that hijacking or whether it's a role of receiving stolen property and selling them and creating a market for it, whatever the role, there's trauma in carjackings to the victim. So one will ask, in that particular instance, if you accepted a charge or gave a plea of a lower sentence, such as wholly suspended for 5 years, and now you don't do it for the one case, you put it there as if it is one case in court, but there are 18 criminal case dockets that we are talking about. So in court, these dockets went to court. Like I say, members of the media, I cannot pronounce on what legal position and mandate is undertaken and the process. I cannot prescribe or comment on it. It is something for the NPA to comment on as to how they arrived at that plea for so many of these cases. And you consolidate all these 18 dockets, you call it one case, and you give one sentence of 5 years suspended, and you say there's a fine that you can pay of 150,000 rand over 5 years. I leave that to the NPA, but I'm not making a statement that I'm leaving to the NPA. Following this media briefing, as we've gone and done this analysis, and we've done an in-depth analysis from the time we realized that KZN investigations are coming under the spotlight, we have a fantastic work done. How did it end up in this way? Now, we cannot allow us to just keep quiet and make a media briefing. So we are preparing 2 dossiers. One will go to the Director of Public Prosecutions, where we're highlighting what our findings was. And members of the media, I must tell you that I'm giving you a summary of the findings. I've hinted to you that in the docket we see very clear actors and people in the organized crime part of this vehicle syndicated crimes. So we are referring this to the NPA to review what scope or role or mandate was undertaken by the prosecutor. Did he have that delegation to do that? Was it approved? And those type of things. We also will send a separate dossier to the Magistrate Judicial Commission for them to undertake an exercise to determine whether the magistrate was provided with all the relevant information when he accepted this plea from the accused. So that is a part we will leave for the judicial system. So I think when we talked about the certain aspects that needs to be looked at within the prosecutorial authority as well as the judicial system, it is what has always been played out in the media. I want to then talk and touch on a few other matters that did come up during the press conversations of Mr. Stuart, as well as certain aspects that came out from Lieutenant General Kumalo. But before I go there, I want to then go back. I indicated to you, I'll come back and tell you about the other cases that was leveled against Mr. Stuart in addition to these cases, and how those cases then was resolved. So when you look at the other cases, I want to point out to you the cases that are not vehicle related and the cases that are on other matters. There's one matter that is related to an assault GBH that was committed, and in this particular offense there was a fine of 3 months or imprisonment of 3,000 rand. There's another matter of common assault and pointing of firearm, and here the imprisonment was for 30 days or a fine of 1,500 rand. Then there was another matter where there was an assault GBH, and the matter was not enrolled because at the latter part of the investigation the victim changed his statement about certain aspects of what happened on the assault. Then we have another case which was withdrawn in court, and that's a Mkhwanazi case, and that's for theft of motor vehicle. Then we have another case that is also withdrawn at court because of insufficient evidence that was leveled against Mr. Scharnick, was common robbery. That's in Richards Bay. We have another matter that was also declined to prosecute. It's a common assault. We have another matter that was resolved through the ADR process, which is an alternative dispute resolution, which was assault GBH and pointing a firearm. We have another matter where he was accused of possession of unlicensed firearm and ammunition, and in that particular matter he was found not guilty for various evidence that was lacking in proving the charge. Then he was also found not guilty on a malicious injury to property docket in the Richards Bay area. He was also found not guilty in another matter for discharging of firearm in a public place in a Richards Bay matter, and he was also found not guilty in the Maiden Wharf matter for the theft of motor vehicle. Why do I reflect on the full history of the cases of Mr. Stuart Scharnick? Because of a statement he made that his reputation and his image is being tarnished. I think we have to reflect on this number of cases, and you look at the cases, both from the vehicle crime cases, and you look at the other cases that involves some form of aggression in terms of allegations against him. So you can see, I'm not sure when we talk about the South African police must defend itself of saying something, because Mr. Stuart has indicated that Lieutenant General Kumalo is the one who is acting on behalf of SAPS, and he intends to cite SAPS in a civil litigation. So when he says his reputation is being violated, then when I look at this history that I've provided, I'm trying to ask myself, what is factual here about your reputation? How will the South African police services be backfooted on what we know about you and the history that you provide us through your interaction with the criminal justice system? That's the information we have. Now let me address the news of the media, the other two issues that one must reflect on. During the process of profiling Mr. Scharnick, we had to understand there's a number of things that comes up that makes us ask some questions. One of them is this issue of him having a criminal conviction where he says that he's cleared of that. He doesn't have a criminal record. When we look at the criminal record system, I am unfortunately here to tell you that during the month of January this year, we went into the system to do an audit of this part of his information. In our course of doing this preliminary investigation, on the 16th of January at 16:58 in the afternoon of that day, a particular employee of the South African Police Services went into the criminal record system and made some adjustments to the benefit of Mr. Stuart Scharnick. That's why Mr. Scharnick is so confident to say there'll be nothing on the system. Unfortunately, the particular employee doesn't understand the full extent of auditing side of the back end of systems. And on the back end of systems, the transactions which he deleted reflects and remains on the back end of the system. Further, we would want to indicate there was some indication that you can apply for an expansion of a conviction, and such expansion, then you get an approval and it then can be taken off the system, which is correct. You can, but there are certain provisions and conditions in certain offenses, and the fine cannot exceed a certain amount of money. In his case, it was 150,000 rand as a fine. The threshold was 20,000 rand. So there's no way one would suggest that he could have obtained an expansion of these offenses from his criminal record. It's possible, yes, on some of the assault cases which is older than 10 years and those type of things where there's an option of a fine and no imprisonment, but not on that instance where the fine is higher than 20,000 rand. So those are still there on the back end of the system, which we have discovered. And I want to indicate that the entire forensic side of the system investigation will now be continuing to bring that evidence forward and to hold that employee accountable. Now, of course, we're not sure whether the employee was prompted by somebody or the employee read an expansion of the one case and then thought all the cases should be expanded. We're not sure whether the employee did it intentionally or was it a lack of understanding of what should be done in the system. But when you look at the timelines, it suggests to us that there was something that was done to the preference of this individual. Now, in that process of this entire Madlanga Commission and the comments of Mr. Stuart Scharnick, we also pick up there's this to and fro about whether he's a security officer and whether he's not. That part we can confirm that he is not registered as a security officer. Then you ask yourself certain questions about his profile, and when we then start to look at his profile, we pick up Mr. Scharnick owns firearms. In specific, he owns 5 firearms. We ask ourselves a question: how will a person with convictions acquire a firearm license? And for what purpose? When we go into the systems, we then start to understand the process that was unfolding for him to acquire these licenses. I want to take just a minute to unpack these application processes so you understand it. Members of the media, everything I'm speaking of is a summary, and as you can see, this file is still a summary of the extent of dockets. If I had to bring those dockets, they will fill this table up. So when we unpack the system of these 5 firearms, there's 2 processes that you follow when you apply for firearm. The first part is to acquire a competency certificate, which talks to the proficiency of how you handle firearms. And once you've passed that stage, you then go into the stage of